We were informed that there is bandit attack in Kurmin Wali in Kajuru Local Government. We quickly mobilized our policemen, military and other security agencies to the area. But to our dismay till now that we are speaking, nobody is able to come out with any figure or name of any person that is kidnapped from that community. Our policemen, the chairman of the local government and other agencies were at the alleged scene of crime. We went there. Till now, there is no information about any attack or any kidnapping of over 300 persons.
We are here to make it abundantly clear to members of the public that the narrative from the Kajuru area that people have been kidnapped or whatever in the like of that is totally false.
My people, look at what is happening in this country right now. Because the story I have for you today is one that will leave your mouth wide open in total disbelief. And honestly, it is getting to a point where we have to ask ourselves some very serious questions about the value of human life in Nigeria. We are looking at a situation in Kaduna State that has gone beyond the usual tragic headlines we see every day, and it has entered a new level of confusion and terrifying reality for the families of 166 people who were just trying to worship God on a Sunday morning. The headline you saw is real, and the details are even more shocking than you can imagine, because we are talking about a mass abduction of worshippers, a police force that initially told the world it never happened, and a group of kidnappers who are now making demands that sound like a business transaction for a car dealership rather than a ransom for human lives. It all started on Sunday, the 18th of January 2026, in a community called Kurmin Wali in the Kajuru Local Government Area of Kaduna State, where residents woke up and prepared for church just like any other Sunday, putting on their best clothes and walking to their various places of worship to pray for peace and protection. But unfortunately, peace was far from what they got that morning. According to reports from the villagers and church leaders on the ground, the service was barely halfway through, around 9 a.m., when the sound of hymns and prayers was suddenly replaced by the terrifying crack of gunshots and the shouting of armed men who had surrounded not one, not two, but 3 different churches in the area simultaneously. We are talking about the Evangelical Church Winning All, which is popularly known as ECWA, the Albarka Cherubim and Seraphim Church, and the Haske Cherubim and Seraphim Church, all targeted in a coordinated strike that suggests these attackers had planned this operation with military precision. The gunmen, who came in large numbers wielding AK-47 rifles, did not just rob the people or scare them away. They rounded up the congregations like cattle, forcing men, women, and children to march out of the safety of the church into the uncertainty of the bush. And initially, the count of those taken was staggering, with 166 people forced into the forest, although we thank God that 11 of them managed to escape in the confusion, leaving 166 innocent souls currently in the hands of these bandits. Now, you would expect that with an incident of this magnitude involving nearly 200 citizens, the immediate reaction from the authorities would be a massive deployment of rescue teams, or at least a statement of reassurance to the families. But this is where the story takes a very shameful turn that has angered many Nigerians. Instead of immediate action, what we saw was an immediate denial from the Kaduna State Police Command, specifically from the Commissioner of Police, Mohammed Rabiu, who came out to tell journalists that the reports of the abduction were fake news. It is actually baffling to think about, because while families were crying and rolling on the floor in agony over their missing loved ones, the police commissioner was holding a press conference after a security meeting to describe the report as a fabrication by what he called conflict entrepreneurs who just want to cause panic in the state. He effectively told the world that nothing happened in Kajuru and even challenged anyone claiming otherwise to bring the names of the victims, a statement that sounded incredibly insensitive to the people of Kurmin Wali, who were counting their losses and looking at empty seats in their homes. This denial did not stand for long, because the truth, as they say, is like smoke. You cannot cover it with a basket. And soon enough, the leadership of the Christian Association of Nigeria in Kaduna, led by Reverend Joseph Hayab, came out to forcefully debunk the police's debunking. The religious leaders and the village head of Kurmin Wali, Isaku Danazumi, made it clear that this was no rumor and no fabrication, but a painful reality that they are living through, confirming that 166 of their people are indeed gone. The pressure became so much and the evidence so overwhelming that the first public relations officer in Abuja, CSP Benjamin Hundein, had to step in later to do some damage control, clarifying that the initial statement was not a denial per se, but a measured response pending confirmation, which is just a fancy way of trying to walk back a massive PR disaster while citizens are suffering in the bush. But if you think the police denial is the most bizarre part of this story, wait until you hear the demands that these kidnappers have put forward, because it introduces a new dimension to the kidnapping industry in Nigeria that is both ridiculous and terrifying. Usually, when kidnappers make contact, they ask for a lump sum of money as ransom, maybe 100 million or 50 million naira. But these particular bandits in Kajuru have presented a bill that looks like an invoice for lost goods. They contacted the community leaders and told them that the reason they attacked and took these people was that they, the bandits, had lost 17 of their motorcycles during a recent clash with the military, and they believe the community is somehow responsible, or at least must pay for the replacement of these bikes. They have placed a value of 1.7 million naira on each motorcycle, and when you do the mathematics for 17 motorcycles, it totals roughly 29 million naira, specifically 28.9 million naira, which they are demanding not as the ransom for the release of 166 people, but as a deposit or a condition that must be met before they can even open discussions about the actual ransom for human beings. It is absolutely insane to think that we are in a situation where criminals are demanding compensation for the tools of their trade that were destroyed by the military, essentially telling the poor villagers that they must replace the bikes used to terrorize them before they can even beg for the lives of their wives and children. This demand has thrown the community in total despair because Kurmin Wali is an agrarian settlement where people live hand to mouth, farming the land to feed their families, and they have already been blood dry by previous attacks. You have to understand that this is not the first time they are facing this. Just a week before this major abduction, on January 11th, bandits attacked the same area and taken about 20 people, and the community had to scrape together about 2.6 million naira to get those ones released. They have sold their grains, they have sold their small land, and they have borrowed from everyone they know. So where exactly are they supposed to find 29 million naira just to pay for bandits' motorcycles before they even start talking about the ransom for 166 people? This situation really highlights the total collapse of security in these rural areas and the feeling of abandonment that these villagers face every single day. And it is stories like this that make you wonder how we got here as a nation. It is so important that we continue to amplify these voices, because if we stay silent, these things will continue to happen in the dark. Which is why I want to quickly remind you that if you are following this story and you want to stay updated on the true situation of things in Nigeria, please take a second right now to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that we can keep bringing you these reports that the mainstream media might try to sugarcoat. The reality on the ground in Kajuru is that the people are now left between the devil and the deep blue sea, with a government that is quick to deny their suffering and a group of bandits who see them as nothing more than a bank account to fund their criminal logistics. The village head has said that the bandits are insisting that the motorcycles were stolen by the community or lost because of the community, which is a common tactic used by these groups to justify their terror, shifting the blame to the victims to make them feel guilty or responsible for their own oppression. The implication of this deposit demand is dangerous because if the families manage to raise this 29 million naira, it sets a precedent that bandits can tax communities to replenish their armory and vehicle fleet whenever they suffer a loss to the military. We are watching a scenario where the sovereignty of the state is being challenged not just by the violence, but by the economic control these warlords are exerting over the territories they operate in, acting as the de facto government that collects taxes and levies. The families of the 166 victims are currently in a state of agonizing wait, knowing that their loved ones, among whom are young children, elderly women and breadwinners, are sleeping in the cold forest, likely without food or water, while the negotiation is stalled over the price of motorcycles. It breaks your heart to think of the trauma these captives are going through, the fear in the eyes of the children who should be in school or playing at home, but are instead surrounded by armed men in the bush. The denial by the police has also caused a deep rift in trust between the people and the security agencies. Because when you tell a man whose wife has been kidnapped that it is fake news, you are effectively telling him that his pain does not matter and that the state is more interested in protecting its image than protecting his family. This conflict entrepreneur narrative that was pushed by the Commissioner of Police is a slap in the face to the victims, and it shows a disconnect between the security architecture and the reality of the insecurity that has pervaded the northwest and north central regions of Nigeria. It is not enough for the first PRO to later come and clarify the statement. The damage is already done, and the bandits are likely emboldened by the confusion and the lack of a coordinated, immediate response from the security forces. As we speak, the villagers are crying out to the federal government and the international community for help because they simply cannot raise the money being demanded, and they are terrified that if they don't pay, the bandits will begin to harm the hostages to send a message. This is a recurring cycle in Kaduna State, where mass abductions have become almost seasonal, and despite all the assurances from the government and the purchase of Tucano jets and surveillance equipment, the average villager in Kajuru today is less safe than they were 5 years ago. We need to see concrete action. We need to see the security forces taking the fight to these camps rather than waiting for the families to pay ransoms. And we need to see a government that acknowledges the problem immediately instead of gaslighting the victims. The story of the Kurmin Wali abduction is a wake-up call that the strategy for fighting insecurity needs a total overhaul, because whatever is being done now is clearly not working if 166 people can be marched out of church in broad daylight and the first response from the state is a denial. We will continue to monitor this situation closely to see if the authorities will finally step up to rescue these innocent worshippers, or if the poor villagers will once again be left to sell their future to buy back their lives from these criminals. It is a sad commentary on the state of our nation in 2026, but it is the truth that we must face if we ever hope to solve it.